The vast emptiness of space stretched before Lieutenant Jeho Park's inspection vessel, broken only by the gleaming crystalline structure of Outpost 7 floating like a jewel against the backdrop of stars. She had made this journey dozens of times before, but something felt different today. The station's usual calm was disrupted by an unusual buzz of activity, with small maintenance vessels darting about like excited insects. Jaiho ran her fingers through her short black hair, a habit she'd developed during tense situations. The routine inspection she planned for today was quickly becoming anything but routine. Her vessel's sensors had picked up an enormous energy signature approaching the station, one that didn't match any known human ships. "Lieutenant Park," Captain Daewon Lee's voice crackled through her comm system. "Are you seeing what we're seeing?" "Yes, sir," she replied, her eyes fixed on the holographic display. "Energy signature suggests a vessel at least 3 times the size of our largest battleship." The mystery ship emerged from the darkness like a creature from ancient marine legends. Its hull gleamed with a metallic sheen that seemed to shift colors under the station's lights. The design was unmistakable. Validary. The notoriously private species rarely ventured this far into neutral space, and they never ever allowed close contact with other species. "Lieutenant, this is now a Priority 1 diplomatic situation," Captain Lee said, his voice tense but controlled. "The Validary ship is requesting permission to dock at Outpost 7. They're specifically asking for you." Jaiho's heart skipped a beat. "Me? Sir, there must be some mistake. I'm just an inspector." "Not anymore. You're now our acting diplomatic liaison. The Validary commander specifically requested the human inspector. That's you." As Jaiho guided her vessel toward the station's docking bay, she couldn't help but marvel at the Validary ship. Its surface was covered in what appeared to be overlapping plates, reminiscent of an Earth armadillo's armor. The ship's design suggested both beauty and function, with no wasted space or unnecessary ornamentation. The docking procedure went smoothly, though Jaiho's hands trembled slightly as she powered down her engines. The station's artificial gravity embraced her as she gathered her inspection equipment, more out of habit than any expectation she'd needed. Walking through the station's corridors, Jaiho noticed the usual bustle had been replaced by an eerie quiet. Station personnel pressed themselves against walls as she passed, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Everyone had heard stories about the Validary, but few humans had ever seen one in person. Captain Lee met her at the main diplomatic chamber, his usually immaculate uniform showing signs of hasty adjustment. "Lieutenant, listen carefully. The Validary have never allowed physical proximity to humans before. Whatever happens in there, remember that you're representing not just Outpost 7, but all of humanity." "Sir, I'm not trained for this," Jaiho protested. "Shouldn't we wait for a proper diplomatic team?" The Validary were very clear. They want this meeting now, and they want you. Trust your instincts, Lieutenant. You've always had good judgment. The diplomatic chamber's doors slid open with a soft hiss. Jaiho's first thought was that the room seemed too small for the beings waiting inside. 3 Validary stood there, their insectoid forms towering over the human furniture that suddenly looked absurdly delicate. The largest of the 3 stepped forward, its iridescent exoskeleton catching the light in ways that made Jaiho's eyes hurt slightly. Its compound eyes studied her with an intensity that made her want to step back, but she held her ground. "I am Commander Nayrok," it announced, its voice a surprising mixture of clicks and what sounded almost like musical notes. The universal translator rendered the words in clear English, but there was something in the underlying tones that the machine couldn't quite capture. "You are the human inspector." Jaiho straightened her spine, grateful for her military training. "Yes, Commander. I am Lieutenant Jaiho Park of the Earth Inspection Corps." The commander's antennae twitched in what might have been interest or amusement. Jaiho had no way to tell. "Your species has a reputation for adaptability, for seeing what others miss. This is why we have come." The other 2 Validary shifted uncomfortably, their mandibles clicking in what seemed like agitation. Jiho noticed that their movements seemed slightly uncoordinated, almost as if they were fighting against invisible restraints. "We don't usually venture this far from our territory," Nayrok continued. "Necessity has driven us here. A situation has developed that requires unique perspectives." Before Jiho could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red emergency lights pulsed along the corridors, and Captain Lee's voice came through the general comm system. "All personnel, battle stations, unknown vessels approaching at high speed. This is not a drill." The Validary officer's reaction was immediate and bizarre. All three began trembling, their antennae whipping about wildly. Commander Nayrok turned to Jiho, its compound eyes reflecting the emergency lights like dozens of bloody mirrors. "They have followed us," it said, its translator struggling to convey what sounded like fear in its natural voice. "Human, you must help us. Your species may be our only hope." Through the diplomatic chamber's viewport, Jiho watched as 5 ships emerged from the darkness. They were unlike anything she'd ever seen, organic-looking vessels that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. As they approached, she noticed something even stranger. The Validary officers seemed to be moving in perfect sync with the pulsing of those ships. Captain Lee's voice came through her personal comm. "Lieutenant Park, whatever's happening in there, get ready. Those ships aren't responding to any of our hails, and they're not slowing down." Jiho looked at Commander Nayrok, whose mighty form now seemed to be fighting just to remain standing. "Commander, what exactly did you come here to ask me?" The Validary leader's mandibles clicked rapidly. "To inspect us, human. Something is wrong with our people, something we cannot detect ourselves. And now, the source of our problem has arrived." As the unknown ships drew closer to the station, Jiho realized that what had started as a routine day was about to become something that would change the course of human-alien relations forever. She just hoped she would live long enough to see how it all turned out. Through the viewport, the organic ships began to move into attack formation, their hulls now glowing with an ominous red light that matched the station's emergency beacons. The day of simple inspections was over. The real test was about to begin. The organic ships hung in space like floating nightmares, their pulsing forms casting an eerie glow through Outpost 7's viewports. Jiho watched as Commander Nayrok struggled to maintain composure, the Validary leader's normally fluid movements becoming increasingly jerky and uncontrolled. "Shields at maximum," Captain Lee's voice echoed through the station's comm system. "All non-essential personnel to emergency shelters immediately." The 2 Validary officers accompanying Nayrok had pressed themselves against the far wall of the diplomatic chamber, their antennae wildly whipping about. Jiho noticed their mandibles moving in perfect synchronization with the pulsing of the hostile ships outside. Commander Nayrok turned to Jiho, its massive form trembling. "Human Inspector, what I must ask of you goes against every protocol my species holds sacred, but we have no choice." The universal translator couldn't quite mask the desperation in the alien's voice. "What exactly do you need me to do?" Jiho asked, keeping her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. "You must inspect me. Not my ship, not my equipment. Me, my biological form, every part of it." The request hung in the air like a physical thing. The other Validary officers chittered in what seemed like horror, their compound eyes reflecting the emergency lights in fractured patterns. Jiho knew enough about Validary culture to understand the magnitude of what was being asked. The Validary considered their bodies sacred temples, never to be examined by outsiders. "Commander, I'm not sure I understand," Jiho said carefully. "Your species has far superior medical technology than humans. Why would you need me to?" The station shuddered as the first impact hit the shields. Captain Lee's voice crackled through the comm again. "Unknown vessels are launching some sort of biological projectiles, shields holding at 90%. Nayrok's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Our technology is useless against this threat. We cannot detect what is happening to us because..." The commander's voice trailed off as another violent tremor shook through the station. Because what? Jai-Ho pressed. Because our diagnostic equipment has been compromised. Because we can no longer trust our own sensors, our own doctors, our own minds. Nayrok's massive form suddenly lurched forward, nearly collapsing. Jai-Ho instinctively moved to help, then caught herself. Touching a Validari without permission was considered an act of war. But Nayrok surprised her by reaching out with one of its 4 upper limbs, grabbing her shoulder with surprising gentleness. The human nervous system is different from ours. Simpler in some ways, yes, but also more resistant. Your species might be the only one that can see what is happening to us clearly. The diplomatic chamber's door slid open, and Dr. Hae-Nul Kim rushed in, carrying a medical kit. The station's chief medical officer took in the scene with professional calm, though Jai-Ho could see the surprise in his eyes at the sight of a Validari touching a human. "Lieutenant Park, Captain Lee sent me to assist you," Dr. Kim said, setting down his kit. "Though I'm not quite sure what we're dealing with here." Another impact rocked the station. Through the viewport, Jai-Ho could see the organic ships moving closer, their surfaces now covered in writhing patterns that made her eyes hurt to look at them. "Doctor," Jai-Ho said, "we're about to perform the first human medical examination of a Validari ever." Dr. Kim's eyes widened, but his medical training took over. "I'll need to know their baseline biology, their normal vital signs." "No time," Nayrok interrupted, its voice growing weaker. "The data cannot be trusted. You must use only your human senses, your human instruments. Trust nothing else." The commander's 2 officers had begun moving in perfect unison, their motions becoming more mechanical with each passing moment. Jai-Ho realized with growing horror that they were beginning to move in sync with the pulsing of the ships outside. "Your officers," she said to Nayrok, "they're being affected by whatever's out there, aren't they?" "Yes," Nayrok confirmed. "And soon, I will be too. You must examine me now, before—" The commander's antennae suddenly snapped straight up, quivering. "Before I lose control completely." Jai-Ho looked at Dr. Kim, who was already unpacking basic medical scanning equipment. Nothing advanced, just simple tools that relied on direct observation rather than complex diagnostics. "Where do we start?" she asked Nayrok. The Validari commander's compound eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "The neural channels along my exoskeleton. If something is controlling us, affecting our minds, it must be accessing us through our natural biological pathways." As Jai-Ho and Dr. Kim prepared to begin their unprecedented examination, the station's lights flickered ominously. Outside, the organic ships had formed a perfect circle around Outpost 7, their pulsing now synchronized into a single, haunting rhythm. "Lieutenant," Captain Lee's voice came through her personal comm, "whatever you're going to do down there, do it fast. Those ships are emitting some kind of energy field that's starting to affect our electronics. We're getting reports of strange behavior from all non-human species on the station." Jai-Ho looked at Commander Nayrok, who had begun to tremble more violently. The proud Validari leader was fighting against whatever force was trying to take control, but it was clearly a losing battle. "Show me where to begin," Jai-Ho said, picking up a basic medical scanner. "And Commander, thank you for trusting us." Nayrok's mandibles clicked once in acknowledgement. "Trust is all we have left. Now, human inspector, prove that your species is as remarkable as we believe you to be." As Jai-Ho raised her scanner to begin the examination, she couldn't help but think that the fate of not just the Validari, but perhaps all species in this sector of space, might depend on what she and Dr. Kim discovered in the next few minutes. The universe, it seemed, had a strange sense of humor. Who would have thought that humanity's greatest contribution to interstellar relations would begin with a simple inspection? The gentle hum of medical scanners filled the diplomatic chamber as Jai-Ho carefully examined the intricate patterns on Commander Nayrok's exoskeleton. The massive Validari remained perfectly still, fighting against whatever invisible force was attempting to take control of its body. Outside, the organic ships continued their eerie dance around Outpost 7, their synchronized pulsing creating waves of discomfort among all non-human life forms aboard the station. "Look at this," Dr. Kim muttered, adjusting his basic scanner settings. "These micro-perforations along the neural pathways, they're almost invisible to the naked eye." Jai-Ho leaned in closer, her trained inspector's eye catching what others might miss. The commander's normally smooth exoskeleton was dotted with tiny holes, each no larger than a pinprick. They formed intricate patterns that seemed to follow the Valadary's natural neural channels. "Commander," she said softly, "how long have these been appearing?" Nayrok's antenna twitched. 3 lunar cycles. At first, we thought they were natural degradation from deep space travel. Then our crews began to change. The 2 Valadary officers who had accompanied Nayrok were now completely still, their bodies rigid and their compound eyes reflecting the pulsing lights from the hostile ships outside. They had lost their battle for control. "Captain Lee," Jai-Ho called through her comm, "what's the status of the shield?" "Holding at 60%, came the response. "But these aren't normal attacks. Whatever those ships are firing, it's like they're trying to interface with our systems rather than destroy them." Dr. Kim suddenly grabbed Jai-Ho's arm, his eyes wide. "Lieutenant, look at this reading. The perforations, they're not damage. They're access points." Jai-Ho felt a chill run down her spine as she studied the scanner's display. The tiny holes were indeed perfectly formed, each one positioned to provide direct access to the Valadary's neural network. "Someone did this to you deliberately," she said to Nayrok. "This isn't an attack, it's an infection. A carefully planned one." The commander's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Yes, we suspected, but our own medical equipment showed nothing. Every scan came back normal. Even when our people began acting strangely, our diagnostics reported perfect health." Another impact rocked the station. Through the viewport, Jai-Ho could see the organic ships moving closer, their surfaces now crawling with visible energy patterns that seemed to reach out toward the station like hungry tentacles. The equipment was compromised, Jai-Ho realized aloud. Your entire medical database was altered to hide these changes. But why come to humans? Why trust us? Nayrok's massive form shuddered as another wave of control attempts washed over the station. "Because you are imperfect." "I beg your pardon," Dr. Kim asked, looking up from his scanner. "Your technology is crude by our standards. Your neural pathways are simpler. Your medical equipment is basic. But because of this," Nayrok paused, fighting for control, "because of this, you can see what our advanced systems cannot. You can see the truth through your imperfection." Jai-Ho continued her inspection, moving to the commander's neural cluster near what would be considered its spine. The pattern of perforations was denser here, forming almost beautiful geometric shapes. "Doctor," she called, "bring your light over here. These holes, they're not random. They're forming some kind of circuit." Dr. Kim joined her, his own scanner wearing. "It's like they're creating a secondary neural network, overlaid on the commander's natural one. But why would anyone?" "Control," Nayrok interrupted, its voice growing weaker. "They seek not to destroy us, but to. The commander's voice trailed off as its body suddenly went rigid. Outside, the organic ships pulsing intensified, and their strange energy patterns began reaching toward the station with renewed vigor. "Captain," Jai-Ho called into her comm, "we need to know if there are any other ships like these reported in Valadary space." "Checking now," Lee responded. After a moment of tense silence, his voice returned. "Reports coming in from multiple sectors. Similar ships have been sighted near every major Valadary outpost and colony." Jai-Ho looked at the now frozen forms of the Valadary officers, then back at Commander Nayrok, who was still fighting for control. "This isn't a random attack. It's an invasion. Someone or something is trying to take control of the entire Valadary species." "But why?" Dr. Kim asked, Still scanning. Why go to all this trouble to control them rather than simply attack? The answer hit Jai-Ho like a physical blow. Because the Validari have the most advanced technology in this sector of space. Whoever is doing this doesn't want to destroy that technology. They want to use it, and they're using the Validari's own biological sophistication against them. Nayrok's compound eyes fixed on Jai-Ho with desperate intensity. Yes, now you understand why we came to you. Your species, your wonderful imperfections. You are our only hope. The station shuddered again as another wave of energy washed over it. Through the viewport, Jai-Ho could see more organic ships emerging from the darkness of space, joining the others in their synchronized dance of control. We need to get this information to Earth Command immediately, Jai-Ho said. Doctor, download all our scan data. Captain Lee, we need a secure channel tow. She was cut off by a sudden, high-pitched sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The Validari officers collapsed to the floor, and Commander Nayrok let out a sound that the universal translator couldn't begin to interpret. As Jai-Ho rushed to help the commander, she realized that what had started as a simple inspection was about to become something much more complex, a race against time to save not just the Validari on this station, but an entire species from becoming unwilling puppets in someone else's cosmic game. And somehow, humanity's greatest weakness, its technological inferiority, had become its greatest strength in this strange new war. The high-pitched sound that filled Outpost 7 faded away, leaving behind an eerie silence broken only by the soft whir of medical equipment. Jai-Ho watched as Commander Nayrok struggled back to a standing position, the Validari's massive form trembling with effort. The two officer escorts remained motionless on the floor, their bodies now completely under the control of whatever force emanated from the organic ships outside. Can you stabilize them? Jai-Ho asked Dr. Kim, who was running his scanner over the fallen Validari. The doctor shook his head. Their neural patterns are completely chaotic. It's like watching a computer being overwritten with new programming. More organic ships had joined the circle around the station, their pulsing surfaces creating patterns that seemed to draw the eye and disturb the mind simultaneously. Through the viewport, Jai-Ho could see maintenance robots on the station's exterior beginning to move in sync with the ship's rhythm. Captain Lee, she called through her comm. Are you seeing this? Affirmative, Lee responded. All automated systems are starting to behave erratically. We've had to shut down non-essential robots and computers. Only basic systems are still running. Jai-Ho turned back to Nayrok, who had managed to brace itself against a wall. Commander, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. When did your people first encounter these ships? Nayrok's mandibles clicked rapidly. They appeared 3 lunar cycles ago, at our furthest research outpost. We thought they were a new species seeking contact. Then our scientists began to change. Dr. Kim's scanner beeped, drawing their attention. Lieutenant, look at these readings. The perforations in their exoskeletons, they're not just access points. They're nests. Nests. Jai-Ho moved closer to examine the scanner's display. The tiny holes they had discovered earlier now showed signs of microscopic activity. Something's living in there. Not just living, Dr. Kim said, adjusting his scanner's magnification. Growing, spreading, creating networks between the holes. It's some kind of parasitic organism that interfaces with neural tissue. Another tremor ran through the station as the organic ships pressed their attack. Through the viewport, Jai-Ho could see energy tendrils reaching out, probing the station's shields like fingers testing a barrier. The ships, Nayrok said, its voice growing weaker. They are not ships at all. They are hosts, fully converted hosts. The implications hit Jai-Ho like a physical blow. Those were once Validari vessels, weren't they? The parasites didn't just infect the crews, they transformed the entire ships. The commander's antenna drooped. Yes, our most advanced research vessels, now turned against us. The parasites use our own technology, our own biology, to spread themselves. Dr. Kim looked up from his scanner. But why aren't humans being affected? We've been exposed to the same energy waves, the same attacks. Your neural structure, Nayrok explained. It is too simple for them to interface with. The parasites require complex, highly developed neural networks to survive. They cannot gain purchase in human minds or technology. Jai-Ho watched as another maintenance robot outside the station began moving in strange, jerky patterns. That's why they're having trouble with our basic systems. They're designed to interface with advanced technology, but our older, simpler computers are resistant. Precisely, Nayrok said. Your species' technological limitations are proving to be a natural defense. But we are running out of time. The parasites are adapting, learning to interface with simpler systems. Soon, even your basic technology will not be safe. The station's lights flickered as another wave of energy washed over them. Through the viewport, Jai-Ho could see more organic ships arriving, their numbers growing exponentially. We need to get a sample, Dr. Kim said suddenly. If we can isolate one of these parasites, study it under controlled conditions. No. Nayrok's voice carried such force that both humans stepped back. Direct study is how we lost our first research team. The parasites use any attempt to examine them as an opportunity to infect new hosts. Jai-Ho's mind raced, her inspector's training pushing her to look at the problem from different angles. What if we didn't need to study them directly? What if we could observe their effects without giving them a chance to spread? She turned to Dr. Kim. Doctor, do we still have that old electron microscope in storage? The one everyone complains is too basic to be useful. The manual one. Dr. Kim's eyes widened as he caught her meaning. Yes, it's too outdated to connect to our main systems. We only keep it for emergency backup. Get it, Jai-Ho ordered. If these parasites need complex systems to survive, let's see how they handle the most basic tools we have. As Dr. Kim hurried from the room, Jai-Ho turned back to Nayrok. The commander's massive form was still fighting against the parasite's influence, but she could see the battle was taking its toll. Hold on, Commander, she said. We're going to figure this out. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Outside, the organic ships continued their haunting dance around the station, their numbers growing, their pulsing becoming more intense. But for the first time since this crisis began, Jai-Ho felt a glimmer of hope. Sometimes, she realized, being technologically backward had its advantages. The parasites had evolved to hijack the most advanced systems in known space. But how would they handle technology so primitive it might as well be ancient history? They were about to find out. The old electron microscope hummed quietly on its makeshift stand, its dated display screen showing grainy but clear images of the parasitic organisms. Jai-Ho and Dr. Kim hunched over it, studying the tiny creatures that had brought a mighty civilization to its knees. Behind them, Commander Nayrok swayed unsteadily, fighting against the increasing waves of control attempts from the organic ships outside. Look at their structure, Dr. Kim murmured, adjusting the manual focus. They're like living circuit boards. Each one is designed to interface with neural tissue and convert it into a receiver. Jai-Ho watched as one of the microscopic parasites attempted to interface with the microscope's simple electronics, only to fail repeatedly. They can't handle analog systems. They're trying to create digital connections that just aren't there. The station shuddered as another wave of energy pulsed through the shields. Captain Lee's voice crackled through the comm. Shields at 40%. We've lost contact with 3 more decks. The parasites are spreading through our advanced systems. At least we know why they chose the Validary, Jai-Ho said, looking up at Nayrok. Your neural networks are like living computers, perfect hosts for these things. The commander's antennae twitched erratically. Yes, our pride in our advancement has become our greatest weakness. The parasites use our own sophistication against us. Dr. Kim suddenly straightened, his eyes wide. Lieutenant, look at this. When the parasites fail to make a connection, they start to break down. They'd need constant interface with complex systems to survive. Jai-Ho leaned in closer, watching as the isolated parasite on the slide began to dissolve. They're like technological parasites. They can't survive without a suitable host system. Then we have our weapon, Nayrok said, its voice trained but determined. We must trust you to make us less advanced. The statement hung in the air, its implications staggering. The Validari, proud masters of the most sophisticated technology in known space, were suggesting voluntary technological regression. Commander, Jai-Ho said carefully, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? We must disconnect, shut down our advanced systems, return to simpler methods. Each word seemed to cause Nayrok physical pain, whether from the parasites or from the idea itself. Jai-Ho couldn't tell. Through the viewport, the organic ships had begun a new pattern, their movements becoming more aggressive as if sensing their host's potential rebellion. Captain, Jai-Ho called through her comm. How many decks still have basic, non-networked systems? Lower levels only, Lee responded. Engineering, life support, and basic medical. Everything else is either compromised or shut down to prevent infection. Dr. Kim looked up from the microscope. We could convert one of the lower medical bays. Use only manual equipment, chemical analysis, basic treatment methods. Like going back 100 years in medical technology, Jai-Ho mused. But it might work. The parasites can't infect what they can't interface with. Nayrok suddenly stumbled, catching itself against a wall. We must hurry. I can feel them, trying to take control. My officers, they are already lost. Jai-Ho looked at the two fallen Validari officers, their bodies now completely still, their compound eyes reflecting the pulsing lights from outside in perfect synchronization. Doctor, she said, get to the lower medical bay. Set up everything you can that doesn't require advanced electronics. Captain, we need a secure route down there. Taking emergency stairs would be safest. Lee responded. All elevators are compromised. Jai-Ho turned to Nayrok, who now towered over her like a trembling mountain. Commander, this is going to require absolute trust. We'll be using medical techniques your people haven't needed for generations. The treatment will be primitive by your standards. The Validari leader's mandibles clicked slowly. Lieutenant Park, my species faces extinction. Our advancement has become our destruction. Perhaps it is time to learn humility from those we once considered beneath us. Another violent shudder ran through the station. Outside, more organic ships appeared, their numbers now too great to count. The parasites were gathering their forces, preparing for a final assault. We need to move now, Jai-Ho said, gathering the basic medical supplies they'd need. Commander, can you walk? Nayrok straightened with visible effort. I am still Validari. I will walk to my salvation or my doom on my own feet. As they prepared to leave the diplomatic chamber, Jai-Ho caught one last glimpse of the organic ships through the viewport. Their pulsing had become almost frantic, as if they sensed their prey was about to escape. Sometimes, she thought, the only way forward was to take a step back. And sometimes, trust meant letting go of everything you thought made you superior in order to survive. They had a long way to go, both literally and figuratively. But as she helped Nayrok toward the emergency stairs, Jai-Ho allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. The parasites had never encountered a species that chose to become less advanced. They were about to learn that sometimes the simplest solution was the best one. The emergency stairwell echoed with the heavy footsteps of Commander Nayrok as Jai-Ho and Dr. Kim helped guide the massive Validari down toward the lower medical bay. Each step seemed to require immense effort as the parasites fought for control of the commander's body. Emergency lights cast harsh shadows on the walls, and the distant sound of failing systems created an eerie backdrop to their descent. 5 more levels, Jai-Ho said, supporting Nayrok as best she could. The lower medical bay is completely isolated from the main systems. Dr. Kim checked his basic medical scanner. Its simple display showing the commander's increasingly erratic neural patterns. The parasites are trying to accelerate their takeover. They know we're up to something. Through the stairwell's small viewport windows, they could see the organic ships pressing closer to the station, their pulsing surfaces now creating intricate patterns that seemed designed to overwhelm any advanced neural system that observed them. "Lieutenant Park," Captain Lee's voice crackled through her comm, "shields are at 20%. Whatever you're planning, do it fast. Those ships are preparing for something big." Narok suddenly stumbled, its massive form nearly crushing Jaiho against the railing. "The others, I can feel them. All Validare, being consumed. Our fleet, our colonies. Stay with us, Commander," Jaiho urged, helping the alien leader regain its balance. "Focus on my voice. The simplest things are the hardest for them to control." They finally reached the lower medical bay, its ancient manual doors creaking as Dr. Kim forced them open. Inside, the room looked like a museum of medical history: basic chemical analyzers, mechanical diagnostic tools, and equipment that hadn't been used in decades. "Help me get the commander onto the examination table," Dr. Kim called, already preparing various instruments. The table groaned under Narok's weight, but held firm. Jaiho looked around the room, noting the complete absence of modern technology. No computers, no neural interfaces, not even basic AI assistants. "We're completely off the grid down here." Narok's antennae suddenly went rigid. "They're coming. The final assault. They will not let us succeed." As if confirming the commander's words, the station shuddered violently. Captain Lee's voice came through Jaiho's comm, filled with tension. "Shields failing. They're launching some kind of biological torpedoes at." The comm went dead. Above them, they could hear the sounds of systems failing throughout the station. "Doctor," Jaiho said urgently, "what have we learned about these parasites? What's their fundamental weakness?" Dr. Kim worked as he talked, preparing various solutions in glass beakers. "They need complexity to survive. Digital systems, advanced neural networks, sophisticated technology. Without those, they start to break down. But they've adapted to simple systems now," Jaiho pointed out. "We saw them starting to affect basic robots." "Yes, but," Dr. Kim paused, his eyes widening. "But they still need a certain level of organization. They can't handle true chaos." Jaiho looked at the various chemicals Dr. Kim had been preparing. "What are you thinking?" "Human gut bacteria," the doctor said quickly. "The most chaotic, disorganized, successful system in nature. Billions of years of evolution created something so random, so unpredictable, that even modern computers have trouble modeling it properly." Narok's compound eyes fixed on them. "You want to introduce human bacteria into our systems." "A modified version," Dr. Kim explained, already mixing solutions. "Engineered to target the parasites, while leaving your natural neural pathways alone. It's completely primitive medicine, but that's exactly why it might work." Another violent shake ran through the station. Through the small window, they could see organic ships pressing against the failing shields, their surfaces writhing with parasitic energy. "Commander," Jaiho said, "this goes against everything your people believe about biological purity. But right now, it's the only option we have." Narok's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Do it. My people's pride is not worth their extinction." Dr. Kim worked with remarkable speed, using nothing more complex than a centrifuge and basic chemical reagents. The bacteria should attack the parasites while leaving the host tissue alone. "But Commander, this will be unpleasant. More unpleasant than feeling my species being consumed," Narok asked, a hint of grim humor in its translated voice. The station rocked with another impact. Above them, they could hear the sounds of systems failing, of doors sealing and unsealing themselves, of chaos spreading through the once orderly outpost. "Ready," Dr. Kim announced, holding up a large syringe filled with cloudy liquid. "Commander, this will need to be injected directly into your primary neural cluster." Nayrok's massive form trembled, but the Validary leader remained still. "Proceed, Doctor. Let us see if human chaos can defeat artificial order." As Dr. Kim approached with the syringe, Jai-Ho watched the window intently. The organic ships had completely surrounded the station now, their pulsing reaching a fever pitch. Whatever was about to happen would determine not just the fate of this station, but possibly of all advanced species in known space. The doctor carefully inserted the needle into Nayrok's neural cluster. The commander's body went rigid, its compound eyes reflecting the emergency lights in fractured patterns. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then Nayrok screamed. The sound was like nothing Jai-Ho had ever heard before, a mixture of clicking and high-pitched frequencies that made her teeth ache. The commander's body began to convulse, its exoskeleton taking on a strange iridescent glow. "What's happening?" Jai-Ho asked, moving to help restrain the massive alien. "The bacteria are attacking the parasites," Dr. Kim explained, checking his basic scanner. "The parasites are trying to adapt, to organize themselves to fight back, but they can't predict or control the bacterial behavior patterns." Through the window, Jai-Ho noticed something strange. The organic ships pulsing had become erratic, their once synchronized patterns falling into chaos. "It's working," she breathed. "The parasites in the commander's system are connected to the ones controlling the ships. They're all being affected." Nayrok's body suddenly went still, its compound eyes clearing. I can feel them dying. Their control is weakening." Above them, the sounds of chaos began to fade. One by one, systems started coming back online, free of parasitic influence. Through the window, they watched as the organic ships began to drift aimlessly, their surfaces no longer pulsing with malevolent purpose. They had done it. Human gut bacteria, the most chaotic and primitive of biological systems, had defeated an enemy that the most advanced technology in known space couldn't stop. Jai-Ho looked at Nayrok, who was slowly sitting up on the examination table. "How do you feel, Commander?" The Validary leader's antennae twitched experimentally. "Like I have been reduced to using stone tools and crude fire. But," Nayrok paused, mandibles clicking softly, "but I am free. And sometimes that is worth any price." 1 year had passed since the day human gut bacteria saved the most advanced species in known space. Jai-Ho stood at the viewport of the newly constructed human Validary Medical Research Station, watching ships from both species dock and depart in perfect harmony. The station's design reflected its unique purpose, one half gleaming with Validary sophistication, the other deliberately simplified to accommodate human technology. "Still admiring the view, Lieutenant Park?" a familiar clicking voice asked behind her. Jai-Ho turned to see Commander Nayrok, its massive form no longer threatening but comforting in its familiarity. The Validary leader's exoskeleton had healed completely, though faint traces of the parasite's perforations remained as a permanent reminder of their shared ordeal. "Just thinking about how much has changed," she replied. "A year ago, our species barely spoke to each other. Now look at us." Through the viewport, a human medical transport was docking alongside a Validary research vessel. The sight would have been unthinkable before the parasite crisis. "The great humbling," Nayrok said, using the term that had become common among its people, when the most advanced species in known space had to admit that sometimes primitive is perfect. Captain Lee, now Station Commander Lee, approached them with a data tablet, one of the new hybrid models that combined Validary processing power with human-style analog failsafes. "The latest results from the joint research team are promising," he reported. "The modified bacteria have successfully prevented any parasite resurgence in all test cases." Dr. Kim joined them, carrying his own tablet. "And the Validary immune response has been fascinating. Their systems aren't just tolerating our bacteria, they're adapting to work with them, creating new defensive capabilities we never imagined possible." Jai-Ho watched as another ship approached the station, this one bearing the new joint human Validary Medical Corps insignia. How are the new medical protocols working out? Better than expected, Nayrok replied. By combining your species' primitive techniques with our advanced technology, we've created something entirely new, something neither of us could have achieved alone. The station's main medical bay was a perfect example of this fusion. Ancient human microscopes sat alongside Validari quantum scanners. Chemical analysis was performed using both basic human methods and advanced alien technology. Every procedure had both a high-tech and a low-tech backup. The parasites taught us an important lesson, Dr. Kim said, reviewing his data. The most resilient systems are the ones that can operate at any level of complexity. Being able to step down technologically is just as important as being able to advance. Nayrok's antennae twitched, and what Jai-Ho had learned was amusement. My people had forgotten that. We became so focused on advancement that we lost touch with our origins, with simpler ways that still held value. Through the viewport, they could see one of the recovered organic ships being towed to the research sector. After the parasites were defeated, the ships had been found to contain valuable information about other potential threats in deep space. The latest diplomatic reports are encouraging, Lee said, scrolling through his tablet. 3 more species have joined the medical exchange program. They all want to learn about our hybrid approach to medical technology. Jai-Ho smiled, remembering the chaos of that first desperate treatment in the lower medical bay. Who would have thought that human gut bacteria would become the foundation for a galactic medical revolution? Speaking of revolutions, Nayrok said, its mandibles clicking rapidly. The Council has approved your proposal, Lieutenant Park. The inspection court will be expanded to include both human and Validari officers working in pairs. Jai-Ho turned to the commander in surprise. They approved it, even the part about maintaining dual technological capabilities. Especially that part, Nayrok confirmed. Every inspection team will be trained in both advanced and basic techniques. We will never again be vulnerable to threats that target only one level of technology. Outside, more ships were arriving. Vessels from other species coming to learn about the new medical protocols. The station was becoming a symbol of something greater than just human Validari cooperation. We're creating a new understanding of progress, Dr. Kim observed, one that values flexibility over pure advancement, and trust over pride. Nayrok added, my people will never forget that our salvation came not from our greatest achievements, but from your species' most basic biological functions. Jai-Ho laughed. Well, when you put it that way, it does sound a bit absurd. The universe often is, Nayrok replied. But perhaps that is its greatest defense against those who would try to control it. As they stood there, watching the growing activity around the station, Jai-Ho reflected on how it all began, with a strange command to inspect an alien commander. That simple request had led to a transformation in how species viewed each other and themselves. The barriers between advanced and primitive, between sophisticated and simple, had been broken. In their place, something new had emerged, an understanding that true strength lay not in constant advancement, but in the ability to adapt to any level of complexity. And somewhere in deep space, she knew, the parasite's kind were learning a harsh lesson. Sometimes the most primitive defense could overcome the most sophisticated attack. It was a lesson the galaxy would not soon forget.